when I started doing music in my way instead of in others, there was, of course, how to do it was, of course, something. So I went my own way by. This was the first piece where I went my own way. This was original James Taylor's. But then I discovered that the same accords had another effect, different places. So I started doing so. That was actually the beginning of building up a structure of making these sounds in an instrument that became the development for me. Because I found out if you play here, there's not much move. You can move. If you do here, you can move. There's very much more ability, and that was the beginning of this, as you do with jazz standards. But then it was the years that told me that what seems right for me. So it came to be those funny things. So, and actually it began with, I was lucky enough to meet some fantastic musicians in Denmark when I was young, very young, 14, 15 years old. And some of them carried music but no good, and some did music and good. And Paul Ehlers was one of my biggest influences when I was young, a bassist. And well, it has to deal with that I've been fortunate to play with a lot of musicians that was better than me for many years. And that's why what should we say? Well, the answer is, if you have read one newspaper for 10 years, then you might get a little tired of that. And then maybe you stop reading newspapers, or maybe you change to another paper, which also is always orientated in one direction. It's called a non-free press. But that's the same with my music. I think the free things is more important than the structure. So that's why I do so much. So that became was the universe that I think speaks most about the world behind, and that the other, which is the arranged one, or in religious terms, said to be something, which it isn't. So that's part of philosophy, I can call it an existence that is, of course, also speaks through my doing of making sounds for others. So that's why I'm mostly influenced by not music, but other forms. It can be in the world, I see something, a form or something. It can be very much inspired by paintings and photographic art, and not films so much, but more visual speaking. My existence is more speaks more to my sounds than sounds do to my existence. So that's a funny one, because I did make film that Rutger Hauer from Blade Runner and Citizen Kane and Turkish Conflict, Holland's most recognized, most, it's been called Dutch best film in 100 years. So yeah, in Milano the prize was given to the director, and I think the reason why that music was so successful was because it was not music that was on the agenda. So I had to relate to the world outside my own doing and put it into my existence also. And that's, of course, an experience that that speaks, as I just said, it's a way of being with this instrument on me. So then I always refused to use this cable because I thought it was what do you call it? A sidewalk, a easy way to get around with things. But then I felt this was in a way at a parking lot. So I decided to, something new has to happen. So I started to put cables different places on the guitar, no matter where, and I didn't know exactly, but my ears and understanding of visually how it sounds in different places. That's maybe also talking about the inspiration. We make it function immediately. So we can just do, yeah, no matter where. Just do that. So when you can hear the world and read it visually, then you can get something. So that's the start. And I don't really have, what should we call it, an inside knowledge about what I want to do, except if it's for a project, a film or an artist, DVD or something. Then of course I let myself be influenced by the things that I have to communicate together with, or what you say, be together with. So, but I never have an agenda about what's going to happen almost. Of course I have some pieces when I play live that always, some of my favorite tunes that will always have an influence on my concepts in one way or the other. But it's really not, it's something I can pick up from behind maybe, or maybe I think that's good for this occasion, this place, so I do it. Then I find this piece out and say, that would do good in this place, in this environment, this place in being, So then I also taught a lot. I had a lot of students, also conservatory preparation students that always came in. In Denmark only 4 or 5 comes in every line every year, 400 or 500 maybe more, try to get in every year. So that's also a part of my existence with music and guitar. Actually I won a guitar when I was 12 or 13. Must have been before, at my school for the refugees from Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Then we had a big, I went to school with more than 1,400 people, students, pupils, and there was a headline on the party that you collect money for the refugees that came here, so they didn't have to be in the refugee camps we had here for the Vietnamese, so they could have something else. So, and the main prize was the guitar, and the whole school talked about it for 14 days. And then I won. And strangely enough, the vice president of the school said, I won it. The first moment I came in with my parents, and we were on the first, we went up to where you could try to win the guitar, and I bought 3, and the first one was 01, and that was the guitar. Then they asked if they could have the guitar beater until we left, because then more would buy the... and then money would come in for a boss, and I said, yeah, that's fine. But then later in the evening, when we had to go home, the vice president of the school went up to the stage and said, now they finally found the winner of the guitar. And I think that inspired my being in that being is not a line thing. It's there. And no matter who you are, you can't treat it otherwise. So that I always heard, that I very quickly in my life taught that the ones who has to educate me was liars. So I guess that's the first grass in the field that is mine about that it has to be as it is. You can't make something out of it. It ain't. Just because you think it's better. That was it. It's very great wisdom for a kid who was a target for the school almost every day, cut me with glasses, blood afraid and everything. So that was a lesson, that you don't lie to exist, no matter the cause. Then you make it a curse, or whatever, some people call it. And then I started playing those old folk songs. And then that was James Taylor, and that was Bob Dylan, and everything. And it all went in the same chords and harmonies. And maybe sometimes there was something that was strange, so you have to understand what you were doing to just don't do it. And that's the step-by-step development into to what one never knows the next note I play when I do my own things. Most improvisations are built on the scheme that when you reach a certain note, then it legitimizes the others that was before. But sometimes I don't do that because there's no need to, because it's sound. So that's it. But that was how it started with the guitar. 3 years after I had the guitar, and I didn't know how to tune it. And strangely enough, the first tune I could play without looking was a Danish group Koitzsch, which I later came to know, funny enough. But they had a tune on the Christiania album, piece for the Danish state of craziness, one Copenhagen. But anyway, another society, and this is also insane, so who cares? But then the chords was on small squares with dots about where to put the fingers. And one day I discovered that was the way to play, because it was with the texts, and then it was A and 7, and then I found out it stood also there at the squares and top in the record. So that's how I started. And I didn't know that I'd picked, later I found out, it was the hardest tune to play on the record. That was the first tune I could play in my life. Bliv ved. Keep on by Koitzsch. Can't remember. Can't remember it, but there were some harmonies that almost everybody I met didn't know about, and I didn't even know. I just remembered I didn't even remember what the chord's name was, but that was the first tune I ever could play without looking at any notation. So that was a funny thing. So I taught myself the whole thing by this, and then I went to library and bought books with these dots. And of course, piece of music I knew because I couldn't read notes then, so that has to be that way. And then it developed from there, and I wrote them on type machine from the library down on paper, so I had them not just the time the library would let me. So that was how it started. And then, yeah, then I knew Paul, of course, but I never really played jazz. I played other people's songs or made my own, but it was some sort of later, maybe 5 years later, a more advanced way of doing it. But jazz music first came into my life when I was very old. It was 1996 or 7. Of course, I listened to it, and also classic, but I always understood it was too hard to play because you have to read the notes, and I couldn't. So I met a guitarist, Anderson, and we started playing. We had a gypsy duo for 2 years and so. But he didn't teach me notes, but by his doing, because we could work together by ear. Then I found out that if you have to do something of this also, you have to read notes too. So I took Danish children's songs, because I knew very children's song has to be a melody that is very comfortable for a child, you know. So it's always very simple music. And then I could play the melody line, and then I could read the notes and see, okay, that's the intervals, that's the timing in the note. Yeah. So that's how I did that. And then it developed into this jazzy standard thing I did for many years, but I quit again because I think it's not so interesting to do all these standards everybody knows, and then the only interesting is how you treat it. So you can play it's just the chord scheme for what you call Mount Midnight. Thelonious Monk is a crazy rhythmic guy. So both crazy and rhythmic, very different from everybody else. So that was it. And then when I read notes, then I could read the melody lines, for example. And sometimes it proved that very advanced music had a very, very simple structure. For instance, Corcovados. So that was bossa nova grandfather. Jobim, in Carl Jobim, who made the mix of bossa music with jazz doings named bossa nova with Stan Getz on the saxophone. So that's also a way to deal with that. If you are mixing yourself into reality, then you don't have to plan it. You don't have to set it in. And then I find it interesting and more useful in that life is not adult all the time, but also something new, also new things. So that's a way to deal with it. So it's also a way to deal with it. Also is when I wrote a hymn for which is played today in the Danish church, Koitzsch or what you call it. It was you can remember it. Can't remember now, but then I choose a very simple melody line, and of course when it's church music you have to deal with where you are putting it. So there was not all this other things. It was very simple. I had one of Danish leading concert, sent us Stefan to record it, and it went very well. Beautiful song. So that's my whole existence is you have to deal with where you put yourself and what it is, and not with what you want to make of it. And I think that's the whole environment for me of being one person that do this guitar a lot. And then the funny thing, I never practiced. This is the first time I play guitar in a week or something. So that's also fun. I don't, my fingers are not even with hard skin. So that's also a fun thing. Almost not. So most guitars have very hard skin, but I don't, because I don't play much. But we succeed anyway, because existence isn't a failure. So that's a part of my mindset. For instance, Shakti, the Indian group, now named Remember Shakti with John McLaughlin and Shakir Hussain in the first version, and several others, and now also with sometimes Harry Parsons, Chavasia and Shankar and different. But then they could play such very strange harmonies, and then suddenly out of the blue then comes India, you know? So they broke the existence to wake that it wasn't just one thing. And I try to be together with that environment of the breaking almost always. And not a thing and then something that breaks it, because then the other thing was legitimate, as I said before about improvisation and jazz. But to keep the existence and not to steal it from the listeners. That has been one of my aims, not to steal or take. So that's it. So bye bye.